What are you doing?
I'm a Power Ranger.
Yeah, sure, why not?
And we're comparing their movies.
What?
Power Rangers has been a phenomenon since 1993 with the Day of the Dumpster episode that first introduced the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers of Jason, Trini, Kimberly, Zach, and Billy. There have been many incarnations from Mighty Morphin to Zeo, In Space, Dino Thunder to SPD, and even Turbo.
We don't talk about Turbo.
After the aforementioned movie sequel in 1997, there would not be another Power Rangers movie until 2017 that rebooted the movie franchise that saw the basic concept reimagined in a more grounded setting.
And I suppose we're comparing the original 1995 movie to 2017?
More phenomenal! You got it!
Please don't ever do that again.
Well, folks, let's see how they compare as we go back to action.
Oh no.
Ladies and gentlemen,
He's gonna do it.
it's morphin' time!
Ugh. Good Lord help me. The 1995 movie is basically the same formula as the TV series, but on a much grander scale from writing, special and visual effects, and duration. You know, that's fair. This movie is basically what Saban would have done with the series if he had the time, money, and resources to be able to do this much bigger.
The reboot has the basic DNA of the show, but it's done in a way if Chris Nolan had gotten his hands on Power Rangers and did a realistic take.
Would they ask where the other drugs were going?
No.
But that said, the characters do feel more fleshed out and complex as opposed to the two perfect teens with attitude from the original. But I felt like the characters had too much attitude, particularly with the likes of Zach, Trini, and Kimberly. Zach for being reckless, Trini for being the silent moody type, and Kimberly for spreading a private image of a friend. While this version of Jason is a little more reckless with the rival school football mascot, there is still that level of character integrity in how he wouldn't rat out his friends and how he stands up for Billy when he's being bullied in detention. Billy is much more of a loner compared to the David Yost portrayal, and you see his mannerisms as someone who is on the spectrum and not understanding certain forms of humor nor sarcasm. But in that instant, Billy 2017 is on the same level of intelligence as Billy 1995 with the way he's able to get Jason's ankle tag off by hacking it with his computer skills. Kimberly 95, despite being a Valley Girl type, also has a heart of gold. Her friends are her family and, let's be real, she was probably most guys' first crush back in the day. Kimberly 2017 is dealing with the shame of spreading a private image of a former friend of hers and feeling remorseful for what she did. So her arc is about redemption and moving forward, as Jason highlights.
Start over, erase that picture right now.
Jason, it can't be erased.
Then live with it. You did an awful thing. It doesn't make you an awful person. Just be the person you want to be.
And then we have the little grey area of comparing the yellow, black, and red Rangers.
Why grey?
Because of the fact that the 95 movie featured the original Rangers replacements, whereas the 2017 movie is using the original Rangers.
Touché.
To compare 2017 Trini with Aisha is difficult because it's night and day. Aisha is very bubbly and energetic, whereas Trini is very withdrawn and moody. Rocky vs. Jason is another apples to oranges. Jason has this very stoic quality about him where you see him grow into this stand-up leader figure, whereas Rocky is kind of a background character as most of the dialogue would go to Tommy, Kimberly, and Billy.
Tom is the odd one out because his modern counterpart is only mentioned by name in the end credits and all you see is a green Letterman jacket. Although that said, it would have been interesting to see who would have played him.
Now here's an area where the original movie does better than its modern counterpart. As mentioned earlier, the 95 movie uses the TV series formula but simply expands it with regards to scale, tone, and action.
But it does come with its own issues.
Yup. The movie has a real problem with pacing once they lose their powers. It goes from being a Power Rangers scenario with the fight with the Oozemen to traveling to Phaedos to where we get an expanded amount of time with walking, Exposition, the Fred Kelman arc, that really did nothing to advance the story, as it slowed the pacing down more so whenever the story would break away from the Rangers. That said, the modern version has its own pacing issues. It's not until the third act that you're reminded that it's a Power Rangers movie when they morph and call upon the dinosaurs. And the fact that it took them this long just to morph for the first time, whereas in the original movie they could just morph via their morphers and not have to morph via a philosophical state of mind.
And that's another problem. At least the original movie knows it's a Power Rangers movie.
Yeah. The reboot feels like it's a mixture of The Breakfast Club with the detention scenes and how they're a bunch of misfits that don't belong with each other. There are elements of Man of Steel with the Midwest Kansas look of Angel Grove, horror elements when you see Rita looking demonic with the visions that Zordon shows them, and with the suits looking like I can't believe it's not Iron Man.
And let's not forget the quirky Spider-Man and Wolverine moments.
Look, I understand that if you suddenly get endowed with superpowers like that, you would feel a little bit out of place. But the fact it was basically lifting those moments from X-Men Origins Wolverine and Amazing Spider-Man wholesale, it just looks unoriginal.
And let's not forget the over-gratuitous use of Krispy Kreme. Me, I like donuts as much as the next person, but really, that's just overkill. I love Krispy Kremes as much as the next guy, but even I got sick of how gratuitous that got. And what of the villains?
You know, with Ivan Ooze, he's basically a live-action cartoon character with his over-the-top hammy moments that Mark Hamill would have been proud of. Whereas Rita in the modern version bore no resemblance to her TV counterpart that was voiced by Barbara Goodson.
Some have even gone to the length of saying that the 2017 Rita Repulsa looks like an S&M character. Never ever say that again about Rita. That's an image I won't get out of my head anytime soon.
It's probably the darkest version of Rita ever seen from the franchise, and it's interesting that she was originally the Green Ranger along with Zordon being the first Red Ranger. Whereas in the original movie, he's the mentor and the wizard that's contained within his energy cube. And of course, the modern movie reuses the element of Ooze joining with his machine. I didn't see the point of Rita fusing with Goldar, because to me, Goldar has to be a hammy, bumbling henchman. But in this, he's basically a cheap golden recolor of the movie's Megazord.
Oh, so they took the DeviantArt approach. Yes, that's actually a fair description.
The Zord battles with Goldar and the Putties have probably the same amount of time as the original movie before they combine to their respective Megazords, but we'll save our thoughts on that for the effects.
So, who wins this round?
Honestly, I would have to say that the original barely wins this round. It has its own issues with regards to pacing and exposition, but it at the very least knows it's a Power Rangers movie. Whereas the modern counterpart has a lack of identity and borrows elements from other movies that stands out like a sore thumb, along with its own problems with pacing.
This round will see a lot of contrast. So, light and campy versus deep and grounded? Pretty much.
As much as I love the original movie's cast, they weren't going to win Oscars anytime soon. The acting was what it was. It's a little wooden in places, but by this point we had known the cast since season 2 when Rocky, Adam and Aisha took over from Jason, Zach and Trini.
Would it be fair to say that Ivan Ooze was more entertaining than the Rangers? Totally fair.
Even though he's the main heel when he takes out Zed and Rita, there's a lot of charm to Paul Freeman's hammy acting. But to be fair, when you have a movie that has that sense of campy fun, you need a villain that's OTT. So, where does that put modern Rita?
Oh boy.
To me, this portrayal of Rita Repulsa played by Elizabeth Banks, who some of you may remember as Peggy Brandt from the Sam Raimi Spider-Man trilogy, probably chews the scenery up more so than Anthony Hopkins.
Is that even possible? I didn't think so either, but here we are.
Elizabeth just loses herself in the role as the Power Rangers antagonist to where it's a much more raw and demonic version of the character that is apparent in not just the performance but also the appearance. Gone is the classic witch outfit from the TV series and instead is what I can only describe as a tight-fitting green revealing catsuit. And I say green because she starts the movie out as the original Green Ranger.
Bleh. You heard me right.
It's a similar approach with Bryan Cranston as Zordon as he starts out as the original Red Ranger.
Wait, what is this? Mighty Morphin Retcon Rangers? At this point, it may as well be.
Bryan had a role on the original series as a voice of one of the monsters of the week, so for him to come back and be Zordon was good. Given the caliber of acting he's done, from being a comedy TV dad in Malcolm in the Middle to shocking everyone as Heisenberg in Breaking Bad, he brings a lot of depth to Zordon as a reluctant mentor that wants to have a body again and loses patience when the Rangers can't morph so quickly. At least we can say that this version of Zordon seemed to be a little more involved. There is that, but you have to remember that he serves as a motivational and sympathetic character as to why the Rangers travel to Phaedos.
So what about the Rangers themselves?
It's like we said at the start. The original movie was never going to win any awards, but the fans of the series weren't that interested. They had already known these characters for 3 years and they had their faves, mostly with Tommy and Kimberly, played by JDF and Amy Jo Johnson, respectively.
Of which they made cameos at the end. That was very rewarding. And is it just me, or does Amy Jo Johnson not age? Who knows? She might be a Time Lord. I knew it.
The modern cast definitely have a much more grounded and believable acting performance, and you do get to care about the characters. More so with Billy, Jason and Kimberly, whom the movie seems to focus on the most. Zach and Trini have less focus, but you do get to see their troubles, with Trini dealing with girlfriend troubles and Zach being reckless as a facade to cover for caring for his sick mother. Ludi Lin and Becky G do well with the material they're given. Dacker Montgomery, Naomi Scott and Arjai Kyler put on the best performances, and you see their evolution through the movie as Jason, Kimberly and Billy, respectively. Dacker for showing the stand-up leader that he becomes as Jason, Naomi for overcoming her insecurities and atonement as Kim, and Billy for bringing the Rangers together after his death and revival. And considering that Dacker and Naomi are Australian and British respectively, you wouldn't know this with the convincing American accents they put on.
True. So, who do we give it to for acting? Objectively, 2017. Yeah, that's fair. I got love for the original movie cast, especially Amy Jo, but 2017 just did a better job. Oh boy. This is going to be painful, isn't it?
Even though more money was spent on the 2017 movie, $105 million is considered cheap in today's market. I will grant that the visual effects are an improvement on the Zords compared to the $15 million that was spent on the original movie, but even then, when you compare it to the visual effects that were used in 2020's Sonic the Hedgehog, where the cost of that was $85 million to $90 million and they look more convincing, then there's a problem. Also, as mentioned earlier, Goldar looked nasty. Nothing more than a recolor of the movie's Megazord.
And speaking of the 95 movie...
As I stated in the 25th anniversary review, it was a product of its time, but considering that Jurassic Park had better CG for the dinosaurs and that was 2 years prior to this movie, there was no excuse.
I do believe your buddy Raiden had something to say about that.
Oh, good
That's the
lord,
episode format.
that
Over
CGI.
3 times the runtime.
That's
I do like the message of
still ugly.
what you...
And Kaiju Noir had words of equal measure.
Too gay.
Also, that's a
I
terrible
guess it's
neck
true what they
design.
say.
What about the suits?
Not gonna lie, I'm gonna say the original suits hands down.
Really?
Okay, let's be real. The modern suits just had Iron Man and Guyver written all over them. At least the original movie, you could tell that they were Ranger suits from the series. They just had a budget spent on them to where they looked like body armor, but still the design and color schemes of their suits and helmets.
So this means... a tie. Really? Both had bad CGI, but the original had the better suits. Like the cast and effects, the scores are very contrasting.
The 2017 movie just feels like it has scores we've heard before from Iron Man 3 and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Out of the Shadows. Well, that's probably because Brian Tyler scored those as well. He's a good composer, but he doesn't give the movie any identity. Aside from the use of one piece that was used from the original movie.
Go, Power Rangers!
It's like we had to be reminded that this was a Power Rangers movie. Yep.
Say what we will about the time of the original movie, but at least you knew from the tone, writing, casting, and the score, you knew it was a Power Rangers movie. Graham Rafael took what had been done by Ron Wasserman on the original series and just made it bigger and more energetic, from the fight scenes to majestic scenes and, of course, the theme song itself.
So, 95 wins? Without even trying. Oof, that's bad.
As we've pretty much summed up before now, both movies have their issues from pacing and visual effects, but the 1995 movie at least is consistent in recognizing that it is a Power Rangers movie, whereas the modern variant just seems to borrow trends from comic book movies in the last 20 years and just has no real identity.
Especially with elements of The Breakfast Club clearly being borrowed.
It's one thing if a movie is inspired by others, but just to take tropes from an iconic 80s movie like that is lazy. There were plans to bring Tommy Oliver in as the Green Ranger for a sequel, but due to the underwhelming performance at the box office, it was decided to reboot the series again.
Let's hear it. Your 2 cents on Power Rangers.
Oh boy, where to start? Well, first things first, I applaud Saban for at least attempting to put together a Power Rangers movie that tried to take itself seriously. Now, when I say seriously, I don't mean the filmmakers taking the movie in a dark direction, but rather I mean that the filmmakers were able to take their job seriously in crafting a movie with a goofy concept while making the audience feel invested in its characters, like any other good superhero movie. For too long, people tend to see the entirety of Power Rangers as just the campy, goofy, and badly aged Mighty Morphin era, when in reality there have been plenty of genuinely good seasons of Power Rangers that most people overlook simply because it's not the first team. Now, when it comes to the movie, in execution, however, the film had a lot of problems. As much as I liked the actors chosen for the films, especially when it came to the 5 Rangers themselves, each of their personal stories stylistically clashed with the third act of the movie due to the decision of shoving all the major action sequences towards the last 30-20 minutes of the film. I feel like it would have been less jarring had the superhero elements of Power Rangers been more spread out, especially in the second act where we could have gotten a Rita or Putty fight scene as opposed to having cheap, unmorphed training sessions. Though, this was probably due to the relatively low budget of the film, especially for an action movie, and the fact that Lionsgate isn't all that well known for making giant summer blockbuster action fests. Another issue I had was with Elizabeth Banks as Rita, as her hammy lines and scene-chewing performance was another stylistic clash that made her seem like she popped out of a completely different film. This is especially noticeable when you can notice how down-to-earth Bryan Cranston's Zordon feels in comparison. Finally, I absolutely hated the artistic direction of the film. Everything from the suits, to the Zords, to Alpha 5, and especially the bland-looking Megazord, all looked downright ugly to me. For a movie based on a property, which was also based on a highly imaginative Japanese franchise that had so many wonderful and imaginative designs, I was very disappointed, especially as a giant robot fan myself. The Power Rangers film the Power Rangers film could have been something unique and special, like it had been for the last 25 years on television, but sadly the film is bogged down by creative decisions from people who probably wanted to capture elements from other popular movie franchises rather than what made the teenagers with attitudes so iconic in the first place.
The 95 movie, at the very least, had a sequel. We don't talk about that movie. But We do not talk about Turbo.
The 95 movie isn't perfect by any means, but it's a guilty pleasure for some that just enjoy it for what it is. It knows it's a Power Rangers movie, and that, in of itself, is satisfying enough.
I guess I'll teleport back to the past. We've been MJ Knight, and we compared Power Rangers. And let's not offer... Like some fava beans and a bottle of Chianti. There's Lids looking at it. There's Lids going at it. You're enjoying that way too much. Yes, I am, Lids. Yes. Oh, I'm turning into Onirakaku. And Onirakaku. And now, next week, I'm going to review South Park the movie. Raiden's like, this is going to be good. Raiden, you don't have a bottle of Chianti. I don't care. That's really... Okay, dude, I'm not that dark. Shit. Well, shut up!